If you are new here, please consider subscribing. Your one click can make my day.
Chapter 1. Serafina. Present day. The police station reeked of stale coffee and bureaucratic decay, that special kind of rot that settled in when justice became just another form to fill out. Serafina Romano sat on a cracked plastic chair under flickering fluorescence, ankles crossed, spine straight, expression unreadable. She didn't shift, didn't fidget. She'd done the hard part, walked in, filed the complaint, handed over the USB with the recording of Officer Marco Russo whispering filth to her in the evidence room. Now she waited. Her back pocket buzzed. Another message from her boss, probably threatening to talk things out before things got messy. She didn't even glance at it. Let them panic. Across the room, a printer clattered to life, spitting out reports nobody would read. A rookie officer yawned loudly. Someone cursed over a jammed vending machine. Then the room changed. The air shifted, subtly at first, like the barometric pressure before a storm. Serafina felt it before she saw him. He didn't belong here. He walked like a man with nowhere to be and all the time in the world. Crisp charcoal suit, not a wrinkle in sight. Pale shirt, no tie. His eyes scanned the station like it was a chessboard he'd already solved, until they landed on her. She didn't flinch, but she noticed. He was beautiful, in a cruel way. Not classically handsome, too angular, too cold, but magnetic, like staring at the edge of a knife just to see how close you could get before it cut. He sat across from her without asking. "Miss Romano," he said, voice smooth, American but clipped. "You're here about Officer Russo." "Who are you?" she asked. He placed a thick envelope on the table between them. His hands were clean. No ring. Watch. Expensive. Movements. Minimal. Controlled. "I represent interested parties. You've made quite the mess." "Mess?" she repeated, deadpan. "You mean reporting your pervert cop?" A flicker of amusement ghosted across his lips. "Not mine, but people get nervous when someone throws fire around a gas leak." Serafina tilted her head slightly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a solution," he said. 50,000. You walk away. Complaint disappears. No backlash. No drama. She stared at the envelope, then back at him. "You look like a man who doesn't hear no very often." "I don't." "Then this'll be a good exercise for you." She stood, arms loose at her sides. "No." He didn't move. She leaned in slightly, voice dropping an octave. "Tell whoever sent you I don't scare easy. And if they try to come after me, I'll light that gas leak myself." Their eyes locked. For a second, the world narrowed. Everyone else disappeared. The fluorescent buzz faded. Then, as suddenly as it started, the tension snapped. He stood too, tall and still. No raised voice, no clenched fists, just cold detachment. "You'll regret this," he said. "I've regretted worse."
Rowan, same day. She was unexpected. Rowan stepped out of the precinct and into the September heat, blinking once as sunlight hit his eyes. Serafina Romano had not gone as planned. She should have taken the money. Everyone took the money. That's why it worked. But she hadn't even looked tempted. His driver opened the car door. He slid in, ignoring the waiting folder on the seat next to him. Not yet. He didn't need paper to know what he was dealing with. Not when he could still smell her perfume. Something bitter and citrusy. Unapologetic. "She turned it down?" came a voice from the passenger seat. "Dario, cousin, enforcer, necessary nuisance." "She turned it down," Rowan confirmed. "Dumb." "No, dangerous." Dario raised a brow. "You want me to take care of it?" "No." He didn't look at him. Just stared out the window as the city passed in shades of concrete and steel. "She's not a problem," Rowan said finally. "She's an equation." "Same difference." Rowan's fingers tapped the inside of his thigh once. A habit. Not nervousness, calculation. She hadn't folded, which meant she either didn't believe he was dangerous or she didn't care. He wanted to know which. Serafina. Later that night. Her father's voice thundered through the phone the second she stepped through the apartment door. "What the hell are you doing?" "I filed a report," like any normal human being would do. "You know who he's connected to?" "Don't care." "You should." "You think the Leone family won't make an example out of you?" "You're not untouchable, Serafina." She pinched the bridge of her nose, exhaling. "I never said I was. But I'm not going to stay quiet while some cop dry humps me during a search and calls it protocol. You should have come to me." "I did. You said, 'Don't escalate.'" "Because I was trying to protect you." She laughed, sharp and hollow. "You don't protect me. You control me." Silence. Then, the sound of teeth grinding. "You're acting like a child," he spat. "And you're still treating me like one." I'm hanging up. "Serafi." Click. She tossed her phone on the couch and stared out the window. The city pulsed below. Traffic lights, sirens, a dog barking somewhere in the alley. She wasn't scared. Not yet. But the man in the station, the one with eyes like a storm in a bottle, was still in her head. He hadn't raised his voice, hadn't touched her, hadn't threatened anything specific. But she could feel the weight of him pressing at the edges of her life already. This wasn't over. And somewhere deep in her gut, the part that liked jumping off cliffs, she didn't want it to be. Chapter 2. Rowan, present day. Silence. That's what Rowan needed to think, and more importantly, to reset. That woman, Serafina Romano, had clawed her way into his mind like a thorn under skin, small but impossible to ignore. He didn't like irritants. He removed them, controlled them, filed them into silence or vanished them entirely. But she was a splinter in his perfect system. Rowan sat alone in the upper study of his penthouse. The skyline bled across the tall windows, painted in smoggy gold from the dying sun. Behind him, the room was a cathedral of polished wood and deliberate minimalism. No clutter, no chaos, only control. He sipped his whiskey, neat, precise pour, measured by eye like always, and stared down at the open file in front of him. Serafina Romano, 29, employed at a corporate logistics firm, clean record, raised by Italian-born businessman Enzo Romano, minor connections, nothing deep, no criminal history, no ties to any family, not mafia, not police, just a woman. Ordinary. Except she wasn't. He clicked through surveillance photos snapped outside the precinct. Serafina walking out, her jaw tight, shoulders squared. That walk, it wasn't pride. It was defiance. Fire. His hand hovered over the image. He wasn't even sure why he'd had her followed. Number. That wasn't true. He knew exactly why. Rowan leaned back, his jaw clenched. He hated this feeling, this interest. Obsession was a weakness he couldn't afford. But something about her had knocked loose the foundation of his emotional dead zone. It wasn't just her refusal. It was the way she looked at him, through him, like she saw the rot underneath and didn't flinch, didn't run. People like her didn't say no to people like him, not without consequences. He rose and walked to the bar cart, refilling his glass. He didn't drink much, but tonight he needed the burn, needed to remember how to feel something clean. His phone buzzed. "Speak," he said, already knowing who it was. Dario's voice cracked through the speaker. "You want the deep pull on Romano? Give me everything. Friends, weaknesses, bank history, family drama." There was a pause. "You're still on her?" "I thought we'd moved past the brat with a backbone routine." "She's not a brat," Rowan said evenly. "She's precise, angry, unimpressed." "That sounds like a lot of women who end up in bags, Rowan." "She's not ending up in a bag." More silence. Rowan rarely corrected Dario. When he did, it meant two things. He was serious, and it wasn't up for debate. "All right," Dario said. "We'll dig. You want eyes on her apartment? They're already there." "You're doing this yourself?" Dario sounded genuinely surprised. "Since when do you play stalker?" Rowan didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. 3 days later, surveillance, HQ, South End. The feed was grainy. Serafina was in her kitchen, hair in a loose knot, oversized t-shirt, bare feet. Nothing sexual about it. Nothing seductive. And yet Rowan couldn't look away. She was making pasta, moving without thinking. Calm, casual, like she hadn't thrown his entire balance off its axis days ago. "She lives alone," Luca, the tech operator, muttered from the corner. "No roommates, no consistent visitors, drinks a lot of espresso, doesn't date. She's boring as hell." "She's not boring," Rowan said quietly. Luca raised a brow but didn't argue. On screen, Serafina walked to her tiny balcony and lit a cigarette. Rowan leaned closer. She inhaled deeply, exhaled through her nose, and stared into the city like it had betrayed her personally. There was sadness there. Not weakness, not fragility. Something more dangerous. Contained rage. She didn't talk to herself, didn't play music. She sat with the silence like it was an old friend. Rowan studied her posture. She wasn't someone who needed saving. She was someone who had already survived something and didn't want to owe anyone ever again. "Anything from her phone?" he asked. "No calls except her father and a work contact. Texts are minimal. Social media? Bare. Girl's a digital ghost." Rowan nodded slowly. Smart. Measured. Private. His kind of dangerous. That night, he stood on his rooftop, hands buried in the pockets of his coat as the wind clawed at his face. The city stretched beneath him, endless and ugly and beautiful. He'd carved this empire with blood and brilliance. He didn't feel things anymore, hadn't for years. Everything was leverage. Everything was trade. But Serafina hadn't played the game. She hadn't bartered. She hadn't negotiated. She just said no, and smiled while she did it. That smile haunted him more than it should have. Flashback. 10 years ago. Rowan remembered the first time someone underestimated him. He'd been 19, fresh into his uncle's organization, smart but unproven. A local dealer called him a glorified errand boy in front of 5 men, laughed in his face, called him pretty. Rowan hadn't raised his voice. He'd waited, watched. Found the man's daughter walking home 2 days later. He never touched her. Never spoke to her. But he left a single red ribbon from her backpack hanging on the man's steering wheel. By morning, the man had disappeared. He learned then that control didn't come from violence. It came from precision, from patience, And yet, Serafina had done what no one else had. She'd broken that logic with a single look. That annoyed him. And maybe, just maybe, intrigued him. Present day. Rowan's penthouse. The door buzzed once. Dario stepped in, tossing a folder onto the kitchen counter. "Fresh delivery," he said. "Romano's full history. Something weird in there." Rowan opened it. Inside were pages of financial records, high school transcripts, a few expunged juvenile incidents. Graffiti, trespassing, nothing big. But one name stood out. Enzo Romano, her father. A memo clipped to the page showed Enzo had paid out hush money on her behalf when she was 19. A sealed hospital file. Records redacted. Rowan frowned. "What's this?" "No idea, but Enzo paid someone off. Big." "Find out who." Dario hesitated. "You're in deep." "I know." "You planning to pull her into your world?" Rowan closed the folder and looked out the window. "No," he said. But he knew it was a lie. She was already in.
Chapter 3. Serafina, 2 weeks later. There was only so much a woman could take. Serafina stared down at the untouched risotto her father's chef had plated for her like a painting. The dining room smelled like truffle oil and strained civility. Across the long table, Enzo Romano sipped his red wine and pretended not to watch her mood unravel. "You've been quiet," he said at last. "I've been tired," she replied, without looking up. He set down his glass. "You made quite a scene at the precinct." She stabbed a piece of mushroom. "I reported a predator." "That's not a scene. That's a civic duty." Enzo's jaw twitched. "You embarrassed the family." "There it is," she said, dropping her fork. "Not you were in danger. Not, how are you? Just good old optics." "You think this city cares about your hurt feelings?" he snapped. "You walk into a police station accusing one of their own, and what do you think happens? They close ranks, they bury it. And you get marked. Let them mark me." "They don't just mark you, Serafina. They come for you." She stood. "Let them." "Sit down," he barked, voice hard. "You're not walking out of here like a spoiled child." She turned on her heel. "Watch me." The city was a blur of noise and neon. Serafina walked with no destination, only fury in her veins and a lit cigarette between her fingers. She hated him, her father, not just for what he'd said, for what he was, for what he made her be, controlled, choked, mapped out like a business asset. And worse? She couldn't breathe without his money, not yet. She stopped outside a boutique hotel on the edge of Midtown. Glass facade, gold lettering, discreet security, the same one Rowan Leone used. She knew. She'd seen him walk out of it the week after their encounter. Tall, untouchable, with that same ghost of a smirk like he owned the street. She lit another cigarette with shaking fingers. She could walk away, ignore him, file a civil suit, let the system crush her slowly. But she was tired of reacting, tired of being under someone else's heel. Maybe it was reckless, maybe it was stupid, but she was done playing fair. She didn't knock twice. The door swung open, and there he was, barefoot, shirtless, glass in hand, looking every inch like a storm she should have stayed away from. But she stepped inside anyway. "I figured you didn't sleep," she said, glancing around the suite. "I figured you didn't beg," he replied, voice low. She dropped her coat on the chair and turned to face him. "I'm not here to beg." "Then why are you here?" "To make a deal." Rowan took one slow sip of whiskey, eyes locked on her like a predator watching something that had wandered too close. "I already made you an offer." "I'm changing the terms," she said, stepping toward him, unblinking. "No hush money, no bribes." He waited. "One night," she said. "You get me. I get to forget." His brow lifted just slightly. You came here to sleep with me out of spite? I came here because you're the one man I can't get out of my head, she said, voice steady. And that pisses me off. Rowan set his glass down. You want to ruin me, he said. I want to use you. He crossed the distance between them slowly, his presence wrapping around her like gravity. And what happens when I use you back? Her lips curled. Then we're even.
Rowan, minutes later. He kissed her like punishment. One hand gripped her waist, the other tangled in her hair, pulling her head back until she gasped. Not from pain, but from the fact that she'd let him, from the fact that she wanted more. Serafina didn't melt. She burned. Every kiss was a challenge. Every touch, a war declaration. She tasted like fire and defiance, and he didn't realize how much he'd missed the sensation of being fought for instead of feared. Her hands roamed over him like she was memorizing something she had no intention of keeping. No promises. No mercy. She bit his shoulder. He shoved her against the wall. They didn't undress. They peeled. Each layer a stripping of ego and armor, not just fabric. Say it, he whispered against her throat, voice rasped with restraint. That I want you, she breathed. He nodded. I want you. No, he murmured, lips dragging along her collarbone. Say you need it. Her nails dug into his back. I don't need anything. Liar.
Hours later. Serafina lay tangled in sheets and silence, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. Rowan slept next to her. The city blinked outside, lights dimming in slow waves. She should have felt powerful. She'd controlled the game. She'd named the price. But it hadn't gone how she planned. It had been more than heat, more than surrender. There'd been a moment, just one, where his hands trembled on her skin, where her breath hitched for something other than lust. And that terrified her. She rose quietly, pulled her clothes on without sound, and left a whisper of herself behind in the room, in the air.
Rowan opened his eyes and knew instantly. She was gone. The pillow beside him was cold. Her scent was already fading. He sat up slowly, staring into the dark where her silhouette had been hours earlier. No message, no number. Not even a lie to hold on to. She had walked away. Rowan didn't do one-night stands. He didn't do intimacy. He didn't do feelings. But this wasn't about sex. She had taken control from him. And now, worse. He wanted it back. He looked down at his hand. It was still clenched into a fist, still aching. He wasn't sure if it was from restraint or the emptiness she left behind.
Chapter 4. Serafina, 3 weeks later. Mornings had become a problem, the kind of problem that lingered in the back of her throat and in the hollowness behind her eyes, a dull, dragging ache she couldn't shake. She hunched over the toilet, forehead pressed against her arm, waiting for the nausea to pass. Her stomach rebelled against every cup of coffee, every piece of toast, every drop of water. It wasn't the flu. It wasn't food poisoning. She knew what it was. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. Serafina sat back against the cold bathroom tile, wiping her mouth with a trembling hand. She stared at the ceiling like it had some smart-ass answer for her. "I'm not doing this," she whispered. "I'm not." But her body disagreed.
Rowan dash. Nico set the folder down on the table with 2 fingers, careful not to disturb the space more than necessary. Rowan barely looked up from his screen. You're late. I waited to confirm. The apartment building had deleted the security footage from the night she left. Just like you asked. Rowan nodded. Nico hesitated. You sure you want this? He asked. She clearly wanted to disappear. Rowan's gaze flicked up, sharp and cold. I don't lose people, he said simply. But this isn't about an asset. It's not about the night. Then what's it about? Rowan leaned back in his chair, letting silence fill the room like smoke. He wasn't ready to answer that. He barely understood it himself. What he did know was that Serafina Romano had broken a pattern. His pattern. She'd entered and exited his world on her terms. He hadn't had the last word, the last move. He hated that. It wasn't just about sex. Not anymore. It was about the control she refused to give him, and the way her absence kept echoing louder than her presence ever did.
Serafina. Later that night. She stared at the pregnancy test on the bathroom counter like it had betrayed her personally. The second pink line stared back, bright, unapologetic, real. Her throat burned. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just laughed, short, stunned, exhausted. Of course, she said out loud to no one. Of course it's him. It had only been one night, but it hadn't been careful, or slow, or cautious. It had been wildfire. Now she was scorched. Emma was the only person who didn't ask questions. Serafina sat curled on Emma's couch, oversized hoodie drowning her body, hands wrapped around a steaming mug she hadn't sipped. I'm not keeping it, she said. I can't. Emma didn't respond right away. She reached out and gently took the mug from Serafina's hands. Do you want to talk about him? No. Do you think he'd care? I don't want him to. Emma watched her a moment longer, then nodded. You don't have to decide anything tonight. That was the problem. Serafina had already made decisions. One reckless decision. One night she thought she could control. Now? Now she didn't know who she was angrier at, him or herself.
Rowan. Surveillance room next day. She hasn't left the apartment much, Nico reported. Just work and back. She looks off. Rowan leaned over the monitor. Her movements were slower, her face paler. She paused at intersections longer than usual, like her mind was somewhere else. She's hiding something, Rowan muttered. Maybe she's just sick. No, she doesn't get sick, Rowan said. You make her sound like a machine. She was sharp, controlled. Now she's off balance. Nico cleared his throat. If you really want to know what's going on, ask her. Rowan narrowed his eyes. I don't chase. But even as he said it, he felt the lie take root in his chest. Because the truth was, he was chasing. In every surveillance feed, in every conversation replayed in his mind, in every second since she vanished. He couldn't shake her voice, or the way she'd said, use me. He hadn't. Not really. If anything, he'd been the one used. And he hadn't seen her since. That was the itch he couldn't scratch.
Serafina, 2 days later. She sat on the floor of her bedroom with her phone in hand, thumb hovering over his name. Rowan Leone. She'd never saved it. But she hadn't deleted it either. She didn't want his money. She didn't want his pity. But she was running out of time. A dull ache had started in her abdomen the night before. Nothing sharp, but enough to make her body feel like it was bracing for something. And that terrified her more than anything. If she lost this child, she didn't know what that would do to her. And if she didn't, she couldn't raise a kid alone. Not with her father breathing down her neck. Not with her income barely covering rent. Her thumb moved. She called.
Rowan, that night. His phone buzzed once. The name on the screen stopped him cold. Unknown number. He answered immediately. Silence. Then, I need your help. His chest tightened. Serafina. Her voice was strained, low. I wouldn't call if it wasn't serious. Where are you? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. Silence. Rowan didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He just went still. The kind of still that came before something snapped. And the child is mine. Obviously. His voice dropped. What do you want? My baby needs surgery. He blinked. Already? Heart defect, she said. We caught it early. But the operation's expensive. I don't have that kind of money. And your father? She laughed, bitter, hollow. He kicked me out. Because of this? Because of you, she snapped. Because I didn't let him fix it. Because I didn't run to him crying for a solution. Rowan didn't know what to say. I'm not asking for anything else, she added. Just this. Help him live. Then we disappear. Rowan stood by the window, knuckles white, jaw locked. She thought this would be transactional, that she could take his child, then vanish again like a ghost. Number. No, he wouldn't allow that. I'll cover everything, he said. But you're not disappearing. Rowan ... You're not walking away from me again. Chapter 5. Rowan. He had faced death calmly more times than he could count. But the moment Rowan walked through the hospital doors and saw the boy through the glass, wires, tubes, heart monitor blinking a rhythm far too fragile, his hands curled into fists so tight, his knuckles cracked. That's mine. It wasn't a thought. It was instinct. Primitive. Terrifying. He couldn't stop staring. Dark hair, small frame, thin arms, a tight wrinkle between his brows like he was already suspicious of the world. Luca. The name had come from Serafina in a clipped whisper on the phone 2 nights ago. His name is Luca. He's 5. He's strong. But nothing about that tiny body hooked to beeping machines looked strong. He looked breakable. Rowan hated breakable things. Because once something could break, it meant someone could destroy it. The nurse gestured toward a waiting room, but Rowan didn't move. He stayed at the glass, silent, still. He didn't know how long he stood there, but eventually footsteps approached behind him. Measured, familiar. Her. Serafina stopped beside him, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. Her skin looked pale under the fluorescent lighting, not weak, just tired, as if 5 years of fighting life alone had finally caught up to her. He hates hospitals, she said softly, her voice low. Even before the diagnosis. Always gets quiet when he's sick. Rowan didn't look at her. He doesn't look like me. No, she said. He has my eyes. But the temper? That's all you. He wanted to laugh. He didn't. I would have helped if you told me. Serafina tilted her head. Would you? Yes. You say that now. I say that because it's true. She exhaled, almost a scoff. You're not a savior, Rowan. You're a tactician. Everything you do is about control. This isn't something you can manage with money and threats. You don't get to tell me what I am. No, she said, but I can remind you of what you're not. Her words landed sharp, but they didn't cut the way she wanted them to, because Rowan was already bleeding somewhere deeper. Not from her, not even from Luca, but from what he didn't understand. Why this child, this moment, was shaking him to his core. That night, Rowan stood alone in the hospital parking structure, looking down at his reflection in the black surface of his car's window. He didn't recognize himself. The man in the glass looked unstable, restless, like he hadn't slept in years. Maybe he hadn't. Not really. Ever since Serafina, he'd been chasing something unnamed. First it was her defiance. Then it was her silence. Then it was her absence. Now it was this boy, his son, and everything that came with him. The urge to protect was unfamiliar. Not the kind born of honor or love, Rowan didn't kid himself, but of possession. Luca was his. That was enough. No one would touch him. Not the disease. Not her father. Not fate. When he returned the next morning, Serafina was asleep in the chair beside Luca's bed. Her legs curled under her, hoodie pulled over her knees, hair messy and unguarded. For a moment, Rowan didn't move. Then Luca stirred. The boy's eyes fluttered open, hazy and confused. His gaze wandered until it landed on Rowan. A beat of silence, then hoarse. "Are you the doctor?" Rowan stepped closer. "No." "Security?" "No." Luca blinked. "Then why do you look like a villain?" Rowan almost smiled. "Because I am," he said. Luca squinted at him. "You don't sound like one." "I'm working on it." Serafina stirred behind him, blinking awake. Luca pointed a thin finger. "Mama, the villain came back." Serafina groaned. "Rowan, don't mess with him." Rowan didn't take his eyes off the boy. "I'm not." Hours passed. Doctors came and went. Nurses adjusted monitors. Serafina handled it all with the quiet efficiency of a woman who'd had to be strong for far too long. Rowan sat in the corner, eyes always on Luca. The child asked questions constantly, mostly about Rowan. "Why's your voice so low? Do you have a job? Why don't you smile? Do you know Batman?" Rowan answered with precision and amusement he didn't show. He didn't realize until the fourth nurse visit that he was still there, still sitting, still present. Not out of obligation, not out of strategy. Just because. That night, Serafina walked him to the hospital elevator. "You don't have to keep coming," she said. "I know. You've done enough." "No, I haven't." She hesitated. "What are you trying to do here?" "Figure out what I missed." "You didn't miss anything, Rowan. You weren't there." He turned toward her. "And now that I am." Her eyes narrowed. "Don't act like you're here to stay." "I didn't say I was." "Good. Because this isn't your redemption arc." Rowan stepped closer, voice low. "Maybe not. But he's mine." Serafina stiffened. "Be careful," she said. You don't get to claim people just because they share your blood. I'm not claiming. I'm owning my mistake. She stared at him, breathing shallow. And for the first time, Rowan thought maybe she didn't hate him. Maybe she was just scared that he might stay.
Chapter 6. Serafina. Rowan didn't ask. He just told her. The hospital will discharge him on Monday, he said, voice like steel wrapped in silk. You'll come stay at the Wilmot property until he recovers. Serafina's jaw had clenched. That's not necessary. I'm not offering. Of course he wasn't. Rowan Leone didn't offer. He moved pieces, pushed decisions into corners, played God with a calm, unblinking stare. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was her son. She agreed. Not because she trusted him, not because she wanted to live in one of his sleek, silent cages, but because she didn't have anywhere else to go. Her father had made sure of that, and Luca needed stability, not a tired, overworked mother dragging him in and out of cheap apartments while he healed from heart surgery. So she said yes, and she hated herself for it. The Wilmot property was nothing like she'd imagined. No towering penthouse, no modern fortress. Just a secluded, gated townhouse at the edge of the city. 3 stories, dark brick, ivy crawling over the stone like nature trying to claim it back. Inside, it was coldly elegant, minimalist, masculine. Art that meant nothing, furniture that had probably never been sat on, kitchen counters too clean to be real. It felt like stepping into someone else's head and finding nothing warm there. Luca, still drowsy from his meds, was carried upstairs by Rowan's driver while she followed with a small duffel bag and enough guilt to choke herself. You don't have to play hero now, she muttered as they entered the second-floor hallway. Rowan glanced back at her. You think I'm doing this for appearances? I think you're trying to fix something that can't be fixed. He opened the bedroom door with one hand. I'm not trying to fix. I'm trying to protect. Serafina watched as he pulled the covers back for Luca, checking the monitor cable without saying a word. It was the strangest thing. Seeing someone so dangerous do something so gentle. Her chest tightened, and she hated that too. Later that night, she found herself sitting alone in the kitchen. The clock read 2:12 a.m. The house was dead quiet, but she couldn't sleep. Her body buzzed with nerves. Her thoughts ran in tight, anxious circles. The reality of it hit hard. She was living in Rowan Leone's house, her son's father. The man she'd tried to forget. The man who'd ruined something in her, even though she'd gone to him on her own terms. And now here she was, barefoot in his kitchen, wearing one of his oversized black t-shirts because her own clothes were still in a box. She opened the fridge. It was fully stocked. Of course it was, prepped like a high-security hotel suite, every label facing forward. She didn't want comfort. She wanted something to punch. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the marble island. She didn't hear him enter, but she felt him. His presence shifted the air the way storms did, sudden and oppressive. He stepped into the kitchen barefoot, loose t-shirt, sweatpants, hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. It was jarring, seeing him like that. Human, casual, but still carrying that same cold fire behind his eyes. You should be asleep, he said. I could say the same to you. He poured himself water from the sink, leaned against the counter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "Why are you really doing this?" she asked, staring into her wine glass. "Luca is my son." "That's not what I meant." Rowan tilted his head. "You think I have an angle." "I know you have an angle. I don't want custody. I don't want leverage. I don't want you in debt." "Then what do you want?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved closer, slowly, deliberately, until he was standing just across from her, one hand resting on the back of the bar stool. "I want to be close enough to see what I lost," he said, quiet. Serafina froze. "That night," he continued, "you left before I could say anything, before I could even think. You would have ruined it if I stayed? Maybe." "Definitely." His lips curved faintly. You always have to win. She met his gaze. Not always. But with you, I have to. There was tension in the air again, the kind that made the hairs on her arms rise. Rowan stepped around the island. Serafina's body tensed. He didn't touch her, just stood close enough that she could feel his breath against her neck when he spoke. I'm not the same man I was 5 years ago. She turned slightly, jaw tight. And I'm not the same girl who let you undress her like a transaction. He stared at her. You think I just wanted your body? Didn't you? No, he said. I wanted your surrender. She blinked. And when you left, he added, I realized I'd given you mine. Something pulled tight in her chest. She stood, quickly, needing space. We're not doing this, she said. I'm here for Luca. Not for whatever this is. He didn't follow her as she walked out. He didn't have to, because she could feel his eyes burning into her back, like a brand she hadn't realized was still there. That night, she curled into Luca's hospital bed beside him, one arm wrapped around his tiny frame, and tried to breathe through the noise in her head. She was strong. She had survived worse. But this? Living in Rowan's world again? It felt like trying to sleep next to a live wire, and she wasn't sure how long she could keep from catching fire.
Chapter 7. Rowan. Rowan watched her from the doorway. She didn't know he was there. Not yet. Serafina sat at the kitchen table, elbow propped on the wood, her fingers absently swirling the edge of her coffee mug like she was tracing the outline of a thought she couldn't finish. She wore leggings and one of his old button-downs. Sleeves rolled, collar popped, hair pulled up like she hadn't even looked in the mirror. She looked like she belonged here. And that was the most dangerous part. Rowan had made peace with obsession long ago. He'd mastered the art of distance, of needing nothing, no one. He had systems, rules, hierarchy. Everything existed in service to control. But Serafina didn't fit anywhere in that structure. She had crawled into a space no one else had ever reached, and stayed. Not because he'd let her, but because she didn't ask permission. Luca was recovering faster than expected. Strong little bastard. Sharp, too. They'd bonded quickly, in their own way. Not with hugs or soft words, but with silence, with the occasional dry joke. Rowan respected that. He understood kids like that. Children who didn't cry easily. Children who understood quiet could be armor. But Serafina, she still hadn't let her guard down. Not fully. She walked the house like a guest, not a resident. She always had her bag packed mentally, ready to run even if she didn't admit it. He wasn't going to let that happen. Not this time. Later that night, he caught her on the balcony. It was cold. Fall had finally arrived. The breeze pushed through her thin shirt, and her arms were crossed against the chill. She looked out over the city like it was something she might have to fight again tomorrow. You'll get sick, he said, stepping beside her. She didn't flinch. Then I'll get sick. You don't have to punish yourself anymore. She exhaled. You think this is punishment? I think you're used to pain. You wear it like armor. And you don't? She shot back, eyes flashing. Rowan looked at her. Not the woman she pretended to be, but the one underneath it. She was exhausted, still defiant, still standing. You walk around like everything in this house is temporary, he said, but you're not going anywhere. You don't own me, Rowan. No, he said, but I know you. She stiffened. I know what it feels like to give everything to someone and still feel like you're holding a knife behind your back. I know how hard it is to live in fight mode, But I'm not your enemy. You used to be. I never was, he said. You came to me. You asked me to take something from you, but I gave it back. She looked at him, searching for the lie. You think I used you that night? He asked. I think you didn't stop me. Rowan stepped closer. I think you wanted to feel something real, he said. And so did I. They were close now. Not touching, but the kind of close that shifted gravity, that made it hard to tell whose heart was pounding harder. He looked down at her mouth. She didn't back away. What do you want from me? She whispered. He took a slow breath. I want to stop pretending I don't want everything. A beat passed. Then she turned away. Not rejection, just retreat. Her favorite trick. But he didn't move this time. He stepped behind her, slow and deliberate, until her back nearly touched his chest. He didn't reach for her. He didn't need to. His voice landed soft, right at her ear. You're not leaving. Not tonight. Not next week. Don't push me. I'm not pushing, he said. I'm claiming. Her breath caught. She spun, face inches from his, eyes blazing. You don't get to claim me, Rowan. I already did. The second you gave me your name at that police station. That was a war, he nodded. And I've never stopped fighting it. They stared at each other, silent, stubborn, scorched. Then her hands moved, not to push him away, but to grab his shirt. He let her pull him close, let her press her mouth to his like she needed to shut him up. The kiss wasn't soft, it wasn't sweet, it was reckless, messy, honest. And when she finally broke away, lips swollen, breath ragged, she whispered, You don't get to disappear after this. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Not this time. They didn't go to bed that night. They sat on the balcony until the sun came up, not touching, not speaking. Just there. Together. Finally.
Chapter 8. Dash. Serafina. No one told her that even silence could scream in a house like this. The Wilmont estate was a far cry from anything she'd known. 3 stories of cold beauty, marble floors that never creaked, doors that closed too softly, hallways too wide, rooms too large. But it wasn't the size that bothered Serafina. It was the feeling of being watched, even when she was alone. There were no obvious cameras, no mirrors hiding lenses. But she knew better. This was Rowan's house. Privacy was a concept, not a right. Luca adjusted faster than she expected. Kids were like that, adaptable, curious, hungry for new worlds. He loved the massive library, the koi pond in the courtyard, the fact that Rowan didn't blink when Luca asked how many people he'd punched before. Not many, Rowan had said, but the ones I did deserved it. She'd shot him a look. He hadn't even smiled. Luca, of course, had grinned, but Serafina couldn't relax. Rowan's people moved like shadows through the estate, quiet, competent, cold, no names, no smiles, just nods of acknowledgement and eyes that said, "We know who you are." It wasn't hostility, it was hierarchy. They respected her, but they didn't trust her. Not yet. She was the civilian, the outsider, the woman who'd walked out of Rowan's life and reappeared with his blood in her child's veins. And Rowan? He hadn't said the word, but she could feel it in the way he looked at her. Mine. One afternoon, she stepped into the study unannounced. Rowan was on the phone, his voice low, in Italian. Sharp. Business. He didn't flinch when she entered, just held up a finger, finished the call, then set the phone down with practiced calm. "You don't knock?" he asked, eyes on her. "Are you going to start locking doors?" His mouth twitched. "Should I?" "Depends on how many secrets you're hiding." He stood, walked to the bar, poured himself a drink. Midday, like it meant nothing. She crossed her arms. "I want to know what I walked into." "You walked into a house," he said. "Not a war." "Don't lie to me." He sipped, then leaned against the bar, quiet for a beat. "I've kept you out of it." "Until now." "I'm still keeping you out of it." She stepped closer. "That only works if your enemies agree." Rowan tilted his head. "Are you scared?" "I'm a mother. I don't have the luxury of denial." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, "You're not in danger." "You don't know that." "I know what I control." Serafina exhaled. "That's the problem, Rowan. You still think control and safety are the same thing." That night, she sat on the edge of her bed, staring out at the rain tapping against the windows. Luca was asleep in the next room. The house felt tighter than ever. She was safe here, protected, federal-clothed, watched. But she wasn't free. The next day, it all shifted. She was walking Luca to the garden when it happened. 2 black cars pulled up just outside the estate gates. Sleek, expensive, unmarked. The security system didn't blink. Rowan's men didn't move. That scared her more than anything. She froze, hand instinctively going to Luca's shoulder. Rowan appeared within seconds. Out of nowhere, like smoke from a match. He stepped in front of her without a word, his body tense, eyes narrowed at the cars. 3 men stepped out, suits, sunglasses. One of them had a scar down the side of his face like something out of a movie. They didn't approach. They didn't have to. Serafina didn't know what was being said, if anything. But she felt it. A message, a reminder, a challenge. Rowan didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just stood there, arms folded, silent as death. Eventually, the men got back in their cars and drove off like they hadn't just dropped a grenade of tension into the estate. That night, she confronted him. "What was that?" she demanded. "Nothing you need to worry about." "You're joking." "They were feeling brave." "Why now?" "Because they know you're here." Rowan poured a drink. Serafina paced. "So we're targets." "No." "They saw Luca. They won't touch him." "You don't know that." Rowan turned slowly. "Serafina." She stopped. "I've made it very clear to every man in this city, if anyone lays a hand on my son, I will burn their entire bloodline to ash." The way he said it, calm, certain, made her shiver. "You scare me," she admitted. "Good. Not for me." "For him." Rowan's jaw tightened. "I'm not just raising a son," she said. "I'm raising a human. A person. I don't want him to grow up in a cage built from your enemies." "He won't," Rowan said, "because no one will get close enough to try." "But they already have." That silenced him. Because it was true. That night, she sat with Luca on the floor of the guest room, helping him arrange Legos into a crooked spaceship. He looked up suddenly. "Is he my dad now?" She blinked. "Who?" "Rowan." She hesitated. "He's always been your dad." Luca nodded. "He's kind of weird." Serafina smiled. "Yeah, he is." "But he looks at you like you're the son," Luca said casually. She froze. Kids always saw the truth faster than adults. As Luca fell asleep beside her that night, Serafina stared at the ceiling. This house was a fortress, a trap, a luxury prison. And Rowan? He was the lion. She was already in the den. The question was, did she still have the will to leave, or had part of her already decided to stay?
Chapter 9. Rowan. It was subtle, a nothing detail. One most men would have missed. But Rowan wasn't most men. The note hadn't come through a phone call. Not a text. Not a shadow on the street. It came as a flower. left in the mailbox of the Wilmont property. A single white rose. No card, no fingerprint. Just resting there, like a whisper too close to the ear. But Rowan knew the message. White was for peace. White was for family. White was for the ones they'd never let you keep. It was a threat, wrapped in etiquette, the kind of threat his world specialized in. And it was meant for her, not for him. For Serafina. That was the line. He didn't tell her. Not immediately. She was in the sunroom with Luca, helping him build a castle out of magnetic tiles. Rowan stood in the hallway, watching. Serafina laughed at something the boy said. It wasn't a performance. It was real. The kind of laughter Rowan had never heard come out of her before. It cracked something in him, softened something he'd spent years trying to harden. And just like that, the rage came back. Hot. Clean. Precise. Because someone out there had looked at this moment, her and their son, alive and laughing, and decided to put a mark on it. They wouldn't get the chance to do it again. By sundown, Rowan had made the call. Dario showed up within the hour. Grim, dressed in black, already knowing this wasn't a strategy meeting. "Who's the message from?" he asked, not even bothering to sit. Rowan handed him the flower in a clear evidence bag. Dario frowned. "Old school." Rowan nodded. "Leonetti." Dario swore. Of course. Slippery bastard's been circling ever since the ports deal. "He doesn't want my money." "No," Dario said. "He wants to remind you that your peace isn't permanent." Rowan moved to the window. The estate looked calm. The lights in the east wing were on. He could see Serafina's silhouette against the curtain. "She's the target," Rowan said. Dario didn't ask who. He already knew. "Want me to send a warning?" Rowan shook his head. "No more warnings." Dario raised a brow. "You want to go loud?" "No," Rowan said, voice like ice. "I want to go final." The next night, Leonetti's personal driver was found hanging by his wrists in a warehouse on the docks, naked, bleeding, alive just long enough to scream. No note. No name. Just a single red rose stuffed in his mouth. Rowan sat in his study, covered in silence. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was a message in blood. You don't touch what's mine. The house was quiet when he returned. Too quiet. He moved through the halls until he found Serafina in the guest bedroom, curled up with Luca, both asleep. She looked peaceful, but there were faint shadows under her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping well. He wanted to touch her, just to feel if she was real, but he didn't. He wasn't sure he knew how to touch anything without breaking it anymore. The next morning, she found him in the kitchen, still in yesterday's clothes. "You didn't come home last night," she said. "I handled something." She studied him. "What happened?" "Nothing that concerns you." "That's not going to work anymore," she said. "You don't get to disappear when you decide it's convenient." He stared at her. "Are you demanding honesty now?" "I'm demanding respect." His voice was low. "Then don't make me lie." Her jaw clenched. "Tell me anyway." Rowan stepped toward her, close enough to see the gold flecks in her eyes. There was a threat. "Against me?" He nodded once. Her voice dropped. "What kind of threat?" "Symbolic." Rowan .. It's been dealt with. She backed up half a step. You did something. I protected you. By hurting someone. By making sure no one tries it again. Her hands curled into fists. You think this is normal? No, he said. But it's mine. She didn't speak to him for the rest of the day. She stayed in her room with Luca. She ignored his knock at dinner. And when he checked the security feed, she was sitting alone in the dark, knees to her chest. He watched her for too long, then turned the monitor off. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure if he'd won, or if he'd just reminded her who he really was. That night, she came to his room, unannounced, silent. He looked up from the file on his desk. She stood in the doorway like a question he couldn't answer. Her voice was flat. I don't want Luca raised in this. He stood slowly. Then don't run. Rowan. Stay. And I'll build a world around him where no one can reach. You'll build a cage. I'll build a kingdom. She laughed, not cruelly, just tired. You don't know the difference, do you? He crossed the room. I know I've lived without you, and I'm not doing it again. Her breath hitched. You don't get to rewrite this into a love story, she whispered. I'm not rewriting anything, he said. I'm claiming what was always mine. She didn't kiss him. She didn't yell. She just looked at him like she was staring at the edge of a cliff and trying to decide if she'd already fallen.
Chapter 10. Serafina. She hadn't heard her father's voice in months, but the second he spoke, it bloomed like a bruise across her mind. Deep, dull, familiar. You need to come home, Serafina. The message had no apology, no softness, no acknowledgement of where she was or what she'd endured. Just an order wrapped in a command masquerading as concern. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Her lips stayed still. She played it again. Your son belongs with family. Not criminals. I'm coming to get him. You can come willingly, or I will take him myself. There were 1,000 things she could have done after that call. She could have screamed, could have called Rowan, could have broken the glass in the nearest window just to feel something sharp and real in her hands. But instead, Serafina stood in the center of the estate's massive foyer and did what her father had raised her to do. Think, calculate, control. But something had changed. The girl he had raised, the one he'd trained to hold her tongue, wear her silence like a second skin, obey without blinking. That girl was gone, and in her place was a woman who had bled alone in hospital bathrooms, who had taken the long road without looking back, who had faced monsters, and realized some of them wore the face of the man who once tucked her into bed. She found Rowan in the basement training room. No suit, no shoes, bare hands wrapped in tape, shirt clinging to sweat, knuckles raw from the bag he was pummeling like it owed him something. He turned when he heard her. His eyes flicked over her face and knew immediately. Something was wrong. Talk, he said. My father called, she replied. Rowan didn't move, didn't blink. What did he want? He wants custody. Rowan's jaw flexed. Of Luca? Of me, she said bitterly. But he'll start with Luca because he knows I'll never let him near otherwise. Rowan stepped forward. Then he won't get the chance. You don't understand. He doesn't threaten. He acts. Then so do I. She looked up at him, her voice lower now. He has influence. Friends in the court, old political ties, money hidden in places even the government can't touch. Rowan's voice was like steel cooling in the air. I'm not the government. She paused, and then, slowly, if he comes for Luca, I will burn that family name to the ground. I need you to know that. Rowan didn't smile. but something in his gaze shifted. Not approval, not pride, something more dangerous. Recognition. They didn't sleep that night. Rowan paced like a panther. Serafina sat at the foot of Luca's bed, watching her son sleep with his hand curled around a stuffed wolf, completely unaware that the world outside his dreams was about to ignite. She remembered the first time her father slapped her. She had been 12, mouthy, unafraid. She had told him she didn't want to marry someone rich and dead-eyed, and he had cracked her across the face so fast she hadn't even tasted the warning. He'd said it was to teach her strength, but what he taught her was fear, measured fear, the kind that doesn't scream. It calculates, it waits, it watches, and when the moment comes, it rips the knife out of your back and drives it into someone else's throat. The knock came the next day. Rowan didn't answer it. He opened the front door like a man opening a cage, not for someone to enter, but for something to die. Enzo Romano stood in a charcoal coat, flanked by two silent men with identical expressions and identical suits. His hair was perfectly in place. His shoes glinted like weapons. Serafina stood at the top of the staircase. She looked down at the man who had given her life and spent the next 29 years trying to control every second of it. He looked up at her like he was already disappointed. Serafina! Her name sounded like a warning. She descended the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, voice calm. "You're not welcome here." "I'm not here for pleasantries," Enzo said. "I'm here for my grandson." "He's not yours." "He carries my blood." "No," she said. "He carries mine. He carries Rowan's, and we don't need your version of family." Her father's mouth tightened. "You've been manipulated." "No," she said, stepping off the final stair. "I've been freed." Rowan didn't move. He stood beside her, silent, still, a wall made of violence and loyalty. "You're going to start a war, Serafina," Enzo said. "You're walking deeper into darkness." She looked him in the eye. "I was born in the dark. You just kept the lights off." Her father glanced at Rowan. "He will ruin you." She smiled. "He already did. And I survived." Enzo left with a final warning, one that lingered in the cold foyer long after his footsteps faded. "You'll regret choosing him over blood." And Serafina, standing in Rowan's house with her son asleep upstairs and her hands still shaking, whispered, "I already do. But I'd rather regret this than live the rest of my life regretting you." That night, Rowan found her sitting outside, barefoot on the cold stone, staring at nothing. He didn't ask if she was okay. He knew she wasn't. Instead, he sat beside her. "You were going to walk into hell alone," he said. "I was born there." Rowan looked at her, long and quiet. "You don't have to go back." "I know." He reached for her hand. For once, she didn't pull away.
Chapter 11 Rowan. Rowan had always believed there were rules, even in chaos. Not laws. Rules. Unspoken things that kept the underworld from tearing itself apart completely. You didn't go after wives. You didn't go after children. And if you did, you knew you wouldn't live to see the next sunrise. Tonight, someone forgot that rule. And he was going to remind them. It started with a sound. A small, off-tempo noise in the Wilmot hallway. Not the soft footfalls of his men, not Luca's light steps. He'd been sitting in his study, head bent over a map of port shipments, when it reached him. A sound out of place. Wrong. Rowan was moving before his mind even caught up. He crossed the hall in 3 strides, gun drawn, silent as shadow. In the foyer, the front door was ajar, and at the base of the stairs, Luca stood frozen, his little backpack on, his hand caught in the grip of a man dressed like Staff, but with eyes too cold. Rowan's vision went black around the edges. He didn't shout. He didn't warn. He put a bullet through the man's kneecap so fast, the echo arrived a second late. The man screamed. Luca stumbled back, covering his ears. "Go to your room," Rowan said, without turning, voice low, absolute. "Now!" Luca ran. Rowan stepped forward, pressing the muzzle of the gun between the man's teeth before he could beg. "Who sent you?" Rowan asked. The man tried to speak but only choked on the steel. Rowan tilted his head, calm, eyes dead. "Enzo?" The man gave the smallest nod. Rowan fired once, not to kill, but to ruin his other leg. "You touched my son," Rowan said. "You walked into my house. You looked at what's mine and thought you could take it." His voice stayed even. That made it worse. The man tried to spit out a plea. Rowan shot him again, in the hand this time, the one that had held Luca. Then he holstered the gun and dragged the bleeding man by the collar through the house, out the door, across the courtyard. The security team had gathered silently, parting for him as he passed like they were opening a corridor to hell. They all knew what this was. He threw the man into the back of the SUV. Dario slid into the driver's seat without a word. "Where to?" Dario asked. "Dockside," Rowan said. "The old slip." Dario didn't question. He never did. The drive was a blur. Rain slicking the windows, city lights bending into streaks. Rowan's mind wasn't empty. It was sharp, clear, cold. Images flickered Luca's small wrist in that man's grip. Serafina's face if she'd walked in 1 second later. His own reflection in the study mirror. A man who had thought he could build a safe space inside a storm. He wasn't angry. Anger was for amateurs. He was purposeful. At the dock, the air reeked of salt and diesel. The warehouse was dark, but for a single hanging light over the cement floor. Dario's men dragged the intruder out and left him on his knees beneath the bulb. Rowan dismissed them all. This was personal. He circled the man slowly, like a predator deciding which limb to take first. "You're not going to leave this room," Rowan said quietly. "But before you die, you're going to send a message." The man sobbed something about orders, about Enzo, about how he didn't mean to hurt the boy. Rowan crouched down until their faces were level. "You meant to take him," he said. "That's worse." The man whispered. "He said the child would be better off." Rowan's hand shot out, gripping his throat until the words died. "Tell Enzo," Rowan said. "I'm done playing games." Then he stood, walked to the far wall, picked up a length of chain. The rest of what happened didn't echo far enough to be heard above the rain. When it was over, Rowan stood at the edge of the pier, staring at the black water swallowing the last of the night's work. His hands were steady. His heart wasn't racing. But something inside him was shifting. He had crossed lines before. But never like this. This wasn't business. This wasn't control. This was family. And it terrified him. Not because of what he'd done, but because of how natural it felt. He came back to the house before dawn. Serafina was waiting for him in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of his sweaters like a shield. Her eyes were wide but steady. She knew. Somehow, she always knew. "Where is he?" she asked. "In his room," Rowan said. "Sleeping." "And the man?" "Gone." She exhaled, slow, like she'd been holding her breath for hours. "You killed him." Rowan's silence was the answer. You can't keep doing this, she said softly. Not around him. Not like this. He stepped closer. He tried to take our son. I know. He won't again. She pressed her hands to her temples. You think this is over? It isn't. You've escalated it. My father, your father just declared war. I'm ending it. You're becoming everything I'm trying to keep Luca away from. Rowan stared at her, voice low. Everything I am, he said, is what keeps him alive. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt heavy, electric, like a storm about to break. Serafina's eyes softened, just barely. And what keeps me alive? Rowan hesitated. Then, me. He left before she could answer, before she could decide if that was a promise or a threat. Because even he didn't know anymore.
Chapter 12, Serafina. The war ended the way wars always do, not with a headline, but with a silence. A week after the man tried to take Luca, the house became a fortress. New locks, new guards, new shadows in the hallways. Rowan disappeared at night and returned at dawn with eyes like gunmetal and hands that smelled faintly of rain and smoke. Enzo's name stopped being whispered on calls. His men vanished from the edges of the estate. The white roses stopped appearing. But the quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like the moment a glass stops cracking, right before it shatters. Luca healed faster than any doctor predicted. The boy who'd once been tethered to monitors now ran through Rowan's hallways with a wolf pup energy, dragging toys from room to room, leaving chaos in his wake. Serafina should have been relieved. She should have been grateful. She should have been packing their things, planning an escape. Instead, she found herself standing at the kitchen window in the mornings, coffee in hand, watching Rowan in the courtyard below, watching him move like a shadow among the men he commanded, watching him become both the cage and the key. She didn't recognize herself anymore. Was she still the woman who had walked into a police station ready to burn it all down? Or had she become someone else? Someone who measured safety in gunfire and silence, someone who stayed in a house built by violence because it felt safer than the world outside. One night, she found Rowan on the balcony, leaning against the railing, staring at the city as if it had finally bent to his will. "Enzo won't touch you again," he said without turning. "It's done." "You killed him," she said quietly. Rowan didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Tell me." His voice was low, almost gentle. "He was already dead when he came after you." "I just buried the body." She closed her eyes. The man who had raised her, tried to control her, threatened her child. Gone. Just like that. She should have felt vindicated. She should have felt free. Instead, she felt the weight of a door closing forever. "You burned the bridge," she whispered. Rowan turned to her then. "I burned the bridge the first time he raised a hand to you. This just finished the job." They stood there for a long time, the city humming below them like a beast sleeping under its own skin. Finally, Serafina spoke. "I can't raise Luca like this." Rowan didn't move. "You won't have to." "It's over. It's never over with men like you," she said softly. "There's always another threat. Another deal. Another war." He stepped closer. "Then stay. And I'll teach him how to survive it." She met his eyes. "I don't want him to survive it. I want him to never need it." Rowan's face hardened, then cracked. Just slightly. Enough for her to see the man underneath the weapon. "I don't know how to give you that," he said. "I know," she whispered. Luca appeared in the doorway then, rubbing his eyes, holding the stuffed wolf Rowan had bought him. "Mom?" "Can't sleep." Serafina bent, lifted him into her arms, pressed her lips to his forehead. His small body curled into hers instinctively. Rowan watched them, silent. "He's not yours to mold," she said, voice trembling. He's ours to protect. Rowan's jaw clenched. I know. Do you? She asked. Because protection without freedom is still a cage. He took a slow step forward. Then help me build something different. Her heart caught. What are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I don't want you to run, Rowan said quietly. I'm saying I don't want him to grow up thinking monsters can't love. I'm saying, he exhaled, stay, and I'll find a way to be better than what built me. Serafina stared at him. The man who had once felt like danger incarnate now looked uncertain, like someone standing at the edge of something he couldn't name. She thought of her father, of the women she'd seen swallow their own fire to live under someone else's roof, of the night she had chosen Rowan to ruin her, of the boy sleeping in her arms. She thought of everything she had survived, and then she spoke. I'm not staying because you claim me, she said. I'm staying because I choose to. Rowan's eyes flickered. And if you choose to leave? I'll still come back when he calls you Dad, but I won't let him grow up thinking love is ownership. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or the start of something softer. I can live with that, he said. Weeks later, the house felt different. Still guarded, still cold. But Rowan started leaving his gun on the table when Luca came into the room. He started showing up at breakfast instead of disappearing before dawn. He even let Serafina open the windows to let the sound of the city seep in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't normal. But it was real. And for the first time, she believed it might be enough. On a Sunday morning, they took Luca to the park. No guards, no cars, no shadows. Just the three of them under an open sky. Luca ran ahead, shrieking with laughter, his wolf toy tucked under his arm. Serafina sat on a bench, the autumn sun warm on her face. Rowan sat beside her, elbows on his knees, watching Luca like a man trying to memorize a view he never thought he'd see. He's fast, Rowan said. He's free, Serafina replied. Rowan glanced at her. So are you. She smiled, small but real. We'll see. For a moment, it was just them. No war, no blood, no claims. Just a boy chasing leaves, a woman catching her breath, and a man learning that love didn't have to be a battlefield. And maybe, just maybe, the three of them could build something that wasn't a cage, something shaped by choice instead of control, something bound not by fear, but by blood and the willingness to be better.